Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And it's Valentine's weekend, so we saw It Happened One Night.
85th anniversary.
85th anniversary. 85. Can you imagine getting to 85?
No, actually I can't.
No. We saw it at the Electric, which is it's literally a Valentine's weekend thing. So everyone in the screen was a couple.
Except us.
Do you think they thought we were a couple?
I don't think so.
You never know. It might be like when I went to see Film Stars Don't Die in Liverpool, which is about a guy my age who falls in love with a woman the age of all the women who were there.
Yes.
And it must look like I was trying to pick someone up, which I was.
Okay.
Yeah, so It Happened One Night. Pre-code, 1934. Comedy, slightly screwball, romantic.
Not slightly. A screwball comedy from Frank Capra, which is kind of seen as one of a series of films that originated the genre, really. So...
Well, that's why I say slightly. Like, I don't think you start off as full screwball. Screwball really developed. But this has got elements, I think.
Well, she jumps off a ship.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's got elements, but I don't think it's not the same as like...
Catherine Hepburn and Bring Up Baby.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, she's still a heiress, she's still very rich. She's a screwy dame, to use the parlance of the 1930s. He's a man of the people, and she's one of the very rich, and he's behaving, the way that, again, by 1930s conventions, a normal person would. After all, it's Clark Gable being Clark Gable, being fantastic being Clark Gable. She is the rich daddy's girl who has always been used to getting what she wants. I mean, she's a screwball dame. So, but anyway, let's not pick on this because, the film is so interesting and I think so great, because it brings so many elements together. So I think it is a screwball comedy. It's a romantic comedy. It's a very romantic comedy. It's also a road movie. Right, so it's a film in which kind of two people for different reasons go on the road and they get transformed by it, right? And in this case, they get transformed into a couple, amongst other things. And I also think it's one of the great democratic films of American cinema. It's kind of, there are moments that I just find like extraordinarily touching moments of community. The film is set at almost the worst moment of the Depression. So if the worst moment was 1933, the film is 1934, right? And it's kind of showing images of, hobos on trains and, people fainting from hunger and, all of those elements, really. And yet kind of, everyone's on the make, so, people aren't above stealing, right? But on the other hand, everyone is also helpful. The scene on the bus, I think, is a scene that really evokes that sense of we the people, kind of as one, The
scene you're thinking of is where he takes the piss out of the conductor, right? And he makes everyone laugh.
No, the scene I'm thinking of is the daring young man in the flying trapeze.
Oh, right, yeah.
With the song, right? And everybody takes turns singing and, everyone is so transported by that moment that the conductor ends up driving everyone into a ditch.
Yeah.
Really. And, and the mother faints from hunger because, her husband is out trying to get a job in New York and they can't let that possibility go, but they have no money to eat. Right? It's just full of beautiful things like that, I think. Yeah.
Well, the reason the scene that I mentioned struck me, which it did, which is right at the start. He's trying to get the seat at the back of the bus.
Yes.
And there's all these newspapers there, so he chucks them out, ends up in an argument with the conductor, and the conductor just says, "Oh yeah," and that's his only comeback. And he keeps on mocking him for only having that comeback. And eventually, everyone on the bus laughs.
Yes.
And it just struck me that you never see. How often do you see someone make someone else laugh in a film? It doesn't happen. It tends to be people are just making jokes for the audience. You never see that often, which I think is great. And you see it in here, and it's just so kind of liberating when everyone laughs at the guy together.
Yes. There are many moments like that. I think it's a really beautifully written film. So the script is by Robert Riskin, who's a long-time collaborator of Frank Capra's and really one of the great screenwriters. And from the very beginning, kind of, you have this marvelous setup, right? Like, Ellie, played by Claudette Colbert, is being imprisoned in a yacht. Her father doesn't want her to, or her father's trying to annul the marriage that she's already made. And, so she runs off, she swims off the yacht and, to kind of reach her lover. And that's the whole thing. So that's the premise of the film, that she's going out to reach the man she's married and wants to stay married too in spite of the father's protestations. And in fact, during the course of the trip, she ends up falling for someone else.
Yeah.
And there's a real kind of... so if the film is a romantic comedy and it's a screwball and it's also a road movie, it is also, I think, a film about class reconciliation. So at the very end, like a working man and a rich millionaires end up kind of, forming the couple, and thus kind of dissolving all of those, great barriers.
Breaking down the walls of Jericho.
Yeah, kind of, cinematically. It's a beautifully written film. The whole Walls of Jericho thing is just fantastic.
It's a nice touch.
It's a nice more than a touch.
It's a nice running sort of...
It's a structuring thing in the film. And it also kind of speaks of both a desire and a kind of a respect. So one of the things that is very difficult now in terms of watching the film are, the gender aspects, right? I'm going to sock you. He pats her in the ass, right? Kind of, so there is a kind of a threat of violence, and that, women are used to violence, and that violence is a part of every marriage. There's a kind of a set of assumptions there. But on the other hand, the thing about the Walls of Jericho speak a difference, right? He respects those boundaries. He won't compromise her, right? Kind of, he waits until, kind of the marriage.
Mind you, I mean, if I was thinking the first scene that they share a room in, so the title makes no sense. It says it happened one night, and actually it happens over about a week.
Yes.
Which is quite annoying. But it's the second night they spend together, because the first is on the bus. And then when they get that place, they get this sort of little motel, that's it. And they put up the blanket between them. Even though he is, kind of being respectful and whatever, and he hasn't really tried anything on with her. I was thinking, like, if I was her, I'd be very nervous, because he's just a little bit of a creep. Like when she wakes up on him on the bus, he's let her fall asleep on him, and he's just looking at her when she wakes up, and then he says, "You look quite pretty there when you were asleep." I was like, Jesus. Well, I know times are different, but that's still creepy.
I don't know.
It's not as creepy as the other guy, who they make a point of him, the guy on the bus really trying to pick her up.
Yeah, he's a lech.
Exactly.
And he's a liar, and he's married. I think kind of you're meant to read Clark Gable as just a man, like a hot-blooded heterosexual man, right? But he's respectful. He actually, all those things that she thinks, and she is nervous, and she's very, are actually kind of things that he might also be thinking, but there's certainly no danger of him acting on them, which is what makes the film palatable.
Yeah. But it still struck me. I mean, she says, "This is the first time I've been alone with a man in a room. Do you know this is the first time I've been alone with a man in a room?" You go, you should be more nervous, I think.
Is that what he said?
Yeah, she says that. She says the first time that first night in the hotel.
But is that his response?
Oh, no, that's what I was thinking. She should be more nervous.
Oh. But why should she be nervous? I mean, my God.
Because she doesn't know. She doesn't know his name until they turn the lights out. I'm just saying.
I mean, there goes every convention of romantic comedy. In fact, cinema.
Maybe. I mean, the film is like, it is like a kind of, it's like an extended meet cute in a way. Like the thing that what you probably expect a little more from really generic romantic comedy is the meet cute, and then they keep bumping into each other for whatever reason. And in this, they are together. As you said, it's a road movie. They are together the whole time, and then it's over the course of being together every minute that the kind of relationship develops.
The film works out ways of bringing them together. In fact, from the first meeting, she's separated. She sits in a different seat, right? And actually, they're brought back together. Yeah. Right, so kind of, I love the way that the screenwriters have worked out all those elements of bringing them together. So in order for them, to be together in the same hotel, someone's got to have stolen her bag, right? And they make it funny because she's very uppity about it. She doesn't kind of recognize the effort that Clark Gable has expanded on trying to rescue her, right? So kind of when she does end up having to share the room with him because they have no money, you also are on his side, I think. It's her comeuppance for being so snooty, and for feeling that she's got all this privilege and acting as if she's got all this privilege. This is your first time watching it?
Yeah, I've never seen it.
I remember watching it on television as a child, and it's amazing that this film, which I've now seen so many times, it still works, and it still works on every level, and it's got so many scenes that are real, like treasures, really, So I think, for example, the hitchhiking scene is fantastic, right? The first night in the motel is fantastic. The scene with his editor is fantastic. The way that the film organizes so that each of the stars gets a star entrance, I've never really noticed it before, but of course, she jumps off the yacht, right? But the way that you're introduced to him is, there's someone in a phone booth that's drawing all this attention. There's 8 people or a dozen, or there's a lot of people around this booth listening in on the conversation. And then, of course, the camera cuts and it's Clark Gable, right? Yeah. It's a fantastic kind of presentation of a star. So I think the film is almost perfect, really.
That hitchhiking scene is great, and it reminds me. I like the twist. I mean, I guess it's a little bit predictable. That he's very confident about hitchhiking. Completely fails to pick a car up, and the first time she goes out, she shows a bit of leg, and she gets a car. And it reminded me of the similar scene in Rush, where they're hitchhiking on the side of the road in Italy. He tries hitchhiking and gets nowhere. She says, "I know what I'm doing," and she sort of stands quite coquettishly and sticks her thumb out, and the car stops. She's, "Look how great I am." No. And then the guys in the car go straight past her and go to him because he's just started driving for Ferrari and he's a huge star to them. And so I like that. I like the twist in them, the joke in them, which is what this scene gives you. And then what it follows it up with is the guys picking them up won't stop singing, and he really belts and he gives it some, and it's hilarious because it's.
Did you recognise who that was?
No, I don't know who it is. Alan
Hale. You remember, when we saw Robin Hood, that was Little John. Yeah. And actually, he features in a whole bunch of films with Errol Flynn, and he's fantastic with his singing in this.
He's great. Well, I love it. He goes so much further than you kind of think he will, and that's what makes it so funny. He keeps on going, and he sings quite nicely as well.
Yes.
But he's so loud.
Yes.
And he's so he's not tuneless, but he doesn't really have a melody. He's just making it up as he goes along and enjoying himself. And also that's compounded with the fact that Clark Gable he's actually quite hurt because he's failed to pick the car up. And you can tell his masculinity's kind of been trampled on a bit there. And then you've got Claudette Colbert sitting next to him smiling, like she couldn't be happier with the way things have turned out.
I know, but actually I think his dialogue after that is also kind of very interesting, and I think might have spoken the audience's mind because, he tells her, "Oh, why don't I take all your clothes off and then you can have 40 cars stop for you," right? That there's something kind of indecent to sell yourself in that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, the film is kind of full of hints of morality. Yeah, it goes out of its way to make these two very decent people, So, for example, there's all the conversation about hotels. I don't want people like you here. I run a decent place, not aware that actually nothing has happened, right? There's all these little intimations of, what is proper behavior of a man and a woman. What is decency? What is morality? Morality is not to take a $10,000 reward. It's to
just get you $38.60.
Yeah, but it's a point of principle to get your expenses right. Kind of a whole bunch of things like that. I thought,
and also I guess that kind of speaks to some degree what you're saying about the democracy of showing. It's a road trip through the kind of South and through a lot of poor areas. And at the time during the Depression, we're going through real hardship, and you do the whole thing of the proprietors of the hotel saying we're not happy with this, whatever's been going on there. You got to think about queuing up for the shower.
Yes.
You got little things like that. That's just like, no matter what, everyone still has their manners about them.
Yes.
And actually, she doesn't. I mean, that's the whole joke of the sort of, or the point of the shouting, is that she doesn't know that you're supposed to queue up.
Yeah.
Anyone else does.
That's right. And she doesn't understand that not every bus will wait for her.
Yes.
Right. And actually, it's a very interesting film because it is the height of the Depression. So, you could have been very nasty about these rich people, but actually the film is not, right? Whilst really putting its lot in with the poor people,
Yeah.
Which I think, so it's a very conciliatory film, whilst being very democratic.
It's the Green Book of its day.
Oh, please. Actually,
it's a road movie, and it turns out rich people and poor people can learn to get along.
Well, that's true. But on the other hand, there's just one black person in the film.
Yeah.
And it's a very stereotypical kind of black person. So actually, but I almost don't, of course, lucky me not to have to make too much of it. But I almost don't want to make too much of it because, all the other elements of the film kind of work so well. So the two things that really kind of made me a bit uneasy, was, the role, but it is role playing as well. Yeah, the role playing, I'm going to sock you, right? That kind of thing. But which kind of indicates how common that was, right? Like, and certainly the other people's reaction, oh, just another married couple, right?
Yeah.
Or a newly married couple. Yeah, but, that kind of violence was just taken for granted. And also, there is a complete absence of black people until one moment in the film where this very jolly, black man says coffee, boiling hot, blah, blah, yeah. But that's so in that kind of slightly minstrelry manner, yeah.
Yeah, and he's got a shot. It's about a 3-second shot, and he's gone.
But then that's the only black person.
That is it. Yeah.
So, but I like the what we now call the 30s aspect of it, right? The hard-boiled talk, the lack of sentimentality, the newspaper milieu, and the way that the story that debunks the rich and so on is considered to be important, right? That, kind of, I mean, there's always something very romantic about, that kind of depiction of the press, right? Kind of, you're out for the story will make, will sell papers, but you're also kind of trying to uncover, it'll sell papers because you're trying to uncover muck, kind of, I loved it. And there are a few little touches, like the gathering of the carrots at night, the making of a bed from the haystacks, the way that Claudette Colbert's eyes, light up in the dark, right? When they're in the room. I think, those are all lovely things. Yeah, it kind of, it's deservedly a classic.
It won all the Oscars.
It was the first
to get all 5 big ones, right?
Until One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
Was the one that won all major awards thereafter.
Yeah, so Best Picture,
Best Director, Best Actor, Best Actress.
And Best Adapted Screenplay. Yeah, Silence of the Lambs is the other one, that's right. Yeah, so only 3.
Yeah, so, and the film was a sleeper hit. And actually there's a very legendary story around it, really. So what happened was MGM wanted to punish Clark Gable. So, Capra had written this film, which was a bus picture, and there were ostensibly many bus pictures at the moment, and, they weren't making any money, but kind of, Frank Capra had written it, they liked it, and then they couldn't get any leads. So the only reason why they got Clark Gable was because MGM wanted to punish Clark Gable. And basically they got Claudette Colbert because everybody else had turned them down. And she had a window of 4 weeks in which she could make a movie outside of her Paramount contract. And she charged what was then a fortune to be in it, I think $50,000. And then what happened with the film is that it was released, and then it wasn't really a success. It was a mild, it played for a week. And then it's one of those films that the audience made it a success. So kind of they began to hear that in small towns across America, it had been playing over, or, kind of it had been re-requested, and right. And then it worked its way back to the metropolis as well. So, it was an enormous kind of smash. but it didn't start off as such. It kind of, it got the Columbia Picture, release schedule, and then it found its way with the audience, and actually that is something that ended up shaming MGM, and thus kind of part of the reason why they never loaned him out again ever in his whole career at MGM.
What else was it up against, I wonder, in the Oscars that year? Outstanding production. So it won. It was up against The Barretts of Wimpole Street, Cleopatra, Flirtation Walk, The Gay Divorcee, Here Comes the Navy, The House of Rothschild, Imitation of Life, One Night of Love, The Thin Man, Viva Via, and The White Parade. Deserving winner?
For sure, but also it's interesting that there are it was up against 3 other Claudette Colbert films. So Cleopatra,
Imitation of Life
was another one. Actually, I'm not sure whether... So it might just be those 3. Anyway, interesting that 3 Claudette Colbert films are up for the Oscar in the same year. So that kind of indicates, how big she was at that moment, really.
There were only 3 nominees for director. Capra, Victor Scherzinger, and W.S. Van Dyke.
Right.
And only 3 nominees for Best Actor. What were they doing back then that they could only have 3?
That surprises me.
Clark Gable, Frank Morgan for The Affairs of Cellini, and William Powell for The Thin Man.
Huh.
Yeah, so there you go. Anyway, it's lovely, and
it's lovely.
I enjoyed it very much. I suppose I also liked how much it kind of. I like how you saw once they got back to New York, and she thinks he's absconded to get the reward. That's right. Whereas actually he's gone to try and get money to marry her.
That's right.
So she goes and then goes off to reconcile and remarry the Aerogyro bloke. But she's unhappy about it, and obviously he's very unhappy because then he's sort of lost her. And when they sort of split, you actually get quite a little bit of time to sort of live with their unhappiness.
Yes.
Which I really like. And it kind of, I suppose, it then helps to build towards the more romantic reconciliation right at the end.
And what I liked about the reconciliation at the end is that I was expecting a close-up of the newly married couple, right? So you have the scene with the father, you have the scene with the newspaper man, you have the scene with the motel owners, right? And so on. And actually, you hear the music, right?
Yeah.
But
you see the light go off.
Yeah, you see the blanket of the walls of Jericho go down, but you never get a close-up of. You never cut back to the protagonist.
Do you actually see the blanket go down? I thought you stayed outside the house right at the end. I don't remember.
No, well, I think.
Do you see it hit the floor?
I think you do.
I thought you just saw it from the perspective of the motel owners right there, saying they wanted a rope and a blanket for some reason.
Yeah.
And a trumpet.
I think you then do see a shot of the blanket on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
And because the music, that's when you hear the music, ta-da-ta, yeah. But you never cut back to...
Yeah, you never see them.
Yeah, which I thought was actually kind of quite amazing, because the cliche, or the standard way of doing it, is you cut to their faces or something, or you cut to a 2-shot of them together or something.
Yeah.
But actually, it ends without a return to the couple.
Well, it uses the running structure that it's had of them spending the night together
yes.
to do that, and the light flicking off in the motel is really lovely.
It's the template for a whole genre. So, for example, you can't think of Julia Roberts' Runaway Bride. I mean, the whole film is based on, kind of this a trope that was developed in this film. Yeah, Claudette Colbert is about to get married. She runs away, right? Kind of. The Runaway Bride 70 years later with Julia Roberts, right? Yeah. So it's kind of it's historically a very important film for many reasons, but actually what we just discovered is how enjoyable it is to watch now. The audience applauded at the end, really, and there was at the beginning there was just a little bit of applause, kind of, you got the feeling that people were thinking, oh, I want to applaud, but should I? And then actually, kind of, when the lights came up, everybody applauded, and I thought,
did they?
Yeah, they did.
I wasn't paying attention.
So, and I think that's a testament to the film's enduring power.
I'd say the one thing that I did hear was the people sitting next to us, and I agreed with them, when he's getting undressed the first time, and he's describing the way a man takes off his clothes, everyone does it differently, and then he says, according to Hoyle, the trousers should come off next. But he says, actually, what I'm going to do is take off my shoes. And the people sitting next to you, and I agree with them, were going, why isn't he already taking off his shoes? Did people take off their shoes after their trousers in those days? I think that's a flaw with the film. You take off your shoes first. You should have taken off before his shirt. Who takes off their shoes last?
Who cares?
I'm just saying. The film's trying to make a joke out of it, and it's logically implausible. So there you go.
The historically significant thing about that scene is that Clark Gable taking a shirt off made the undershirt industry collapse.
Did it?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. No, well, kind of. I mean, people say it's a myth or whatever, but actually there's been stuff writing about, how it did affect that industry because, Clark Gable took his shirt off and there was no undershirt.
And everyone said, I look just like that fat slob. I can do the same.
If Clark Gable doesn't wear one, why do I need to?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Because he's a fat slob with no regard for his own... Look at him, chubby bastard. You wouldn't get away with that these days. You'd have to look like Zac Efron now.
I thought he looked terrific. So anyway, there you go.
Well, frankly, my dear, I couldn't give a fuck. That's his line.
All right, we better wrap up. Yeah, kind of. It's a wonderful film. It's a classic. It really holds up. And, it's very funny. And the audience laughed in all the right places.
It does hold up, doesn't it? And actually, it made me think right at the start, because really, they were just showing a Blu-ray, right? Or that's what it appeared to be. This wasn't anything special. They didn't get a printing or anything.
No.
They were just showing a Blu-ray. And so I kind of thought, like, what? We're paying £12 for this because we're sitting in the front row, which is where I intend to sit from now on at the electric because it's just better there. The seats are nicer. But you're kind of thinking, like, we could have just watched it here. Why? But actually... kind of the lights go down, the film comes up, and you go, what I'm paying for really is to be in a room with other people and to not be let out. As we've said before, it's always a different experience. And even though they were just showing a Blu-ray, it was worth £12 to see it in the cinema, I think.
Yeah, I did wonder if it was a Blu-ray or if it was a DCP, but it actually...
I don't know. I assumed it was a Blu-ray.
Yeah. It didn't look great quality, let's put it that way.
No, it didn't.
So,
and it has undergone restoration. I mean, it's not, they paid attention to it, so I don't know how good it has looked in any of its restorations. I don't know which one this one would have been. But anyway.
It didn't look restored. Just to quibble, there were, so even the greatest films are not perfect. And I think there were two moments here where I thought, that's a really bad cut.
Okay.
There's a moment where she's just about to jump off the ship, really, which is like a really brutal cut. Like,
I think I know the one you mean.
And then there was the moment where he's about to unzip his pants. Yeah, and you go from him beginning the action to like this really brutal cut where, he's back with his hand on the zip, but now it's in a medium long shot. Right, and kind of the cuts.
You've never quibbled out continuity before.
Well, the things one observes. It seemed very clumsy, rough cuts.
I think much of the editing was pretty nice, actually, in that kind of invisible classic Hollywood sort of style, cutting on an action.
Well, that's why these two things stood out.
And there were little bits that stood out, but it wasn't like it didn't kind of strike me down with the kind of beauty of the imagery, like something like Casablanca.
Okay, well.
I know Casablanca's 10 years on.
In that respect, maybe. But for example, when you see, again, to return to the flying trapeze number, the combination of what's in long shot, right, when they first begin to sing, and it's the performer who's at the center of the frame, and then your eye catches Claudette, Colbert, and Clark Gable on the side, right? So, they're part of the group. And then as the song unfolds, you have them kind of clearly framed in a two-shot as a couple. Kind of the way that scene unfolds is just absolutely brilliant filmmaking.
Okay.
So it's nothing showy. It's not like an odd angle or anything, but it's just like a perfect expression.
It's nice. It's worth looking at.
Yeah.
You can see why people still like it, and it holds up. And
They love it. They love it.
No, chill. They like it plenty.
They love it.
They like it. It's all right.
So, thank you very much for listening. Do make an effort to see it if you can. It's the 85th anniversary of the film, and it's a film that's not only for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, it happened 4 nights. They should have called it.
Okay. Thank you very much for listening. We are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube, and on social media, Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you.
Cheerio.